The old bicycle chain made that familiar clicking sound as 8-year-old Tommy pedaled down the dusty road. It was one of those hot summer afternoons when the air shimmered above the pavement, and even the grasshoppers seemed too tired to jump. School had been out for 3 weeks now, and Tommy had already explored every corner of his small town in South Dakota. Today, he decided to venture a little further than usual, following the gravel path that led toward the hills where his grandfather used to take him fishing. Tommy loved these solo adventures on his bright red bike. His mom always worried when he went too far, but she understood that an 8-year-old boy needed space to explore and dream. The freedom of the open road, the wind in his hair, and the endless sky above made him feel like he could conquer the world. He had packed a peanut butter sandwich and a water bottle in his small backpack, planning to spend the entire afternoon discovering new places. The road curved gently through rolling hills, covered in tall prairie grass that swayed in the warm breeze. Wild sunflowers dotted the landscape like yellow stars, and Tommy could hear meadowlarks singing their sweet songs from hidden perches. He had been riding for almost an hour when something unusual caught his eye. About 50 yards ahead, sitting on what looked like a fallen tree trunk, was an elderly woman. Tommy slowed his bike and squinted against the bright sunlight. The woman appeared to be alone, which was strange because this road didn't lead to any houses or farms. As he got closer, he could see that she was wearing traditional Native American clothing, a long, colorful dress with intricate beadwork and a fringed shawl draped over her shoulders. Her long gray hair was braided with what looked like leather, cord and small feathers. In her weathered hands, she clutched an old leather bag that seemed heavy and worn from years of use. Something about her posture told Tommy that she wasn't just resting. Her shoulders sagged with exhaustion, and she kept looking around as if she was lost or confused. Tommy's mother had always taught him to be cautious around strangers, but she had also taught him to help people in need. His heart told him that this grandmother needed help, and his conscience wouldn't let him just ride past. He brought his bike to a gentle stop, about 10 feet away from the woman, and called out softly, "Hello, are you okay?" The woman looked up, and Tommy was struck by her kind, dark eyes. Despite the worry lines creasing her forehead, her face lit up with a gentle smile when she saw the young boy. She spoke in a voice that was both strong and tired, mixing English words with what sounded like another language that Tommy didn't recognize. "Hello, young one," she said, her accent thick but her words clear. "I am, ... How do you say?" Not knowing where I am, she gestured around with one hand while keeping the other firmly on her leather bag. "I walk for many hours, but nothing looks familiar." Tommy climbed off his bike and walked closer, his natural shyness battling with his desire to help. "My name is Tommy," he said. "What's your name?" The woman's smile grew warmer. "I am Eleanor," she said, pronouncing each syllable carefully. "Eleanor Whitefeather. I am Lakota." She touched her chest with pride when she said this, and Tommy could sense that being Lakota was something very important to her. "Are you lost, Mrs. Eleanor?" Tommy asked, using the polite form of address his parents had taught him. Eleanor nodded sadly. "Yes, little one. I came with my family to gather medicines from the hills. We do this every summer, following the old ways my grandmother taught me." She opened her leather bag slightly, and Tommy could see various plants and herbs inside, some still damp with morning dew. "But I walked too far, following a special plant I needed for my granddaughter's tea. When I looked up, my family was gone. I have been walking since the sun was high overhead." Tommy looked at the sun, which was now definitely past its highest point. That meant Eleanor had been walking for at least 4 hours, maybe more. No wonder. She looked so tired. He felt a surge of sympathy for this kind grandmother, who was clearly worried about her family and probably scared, even though she was trying to stay brave. "Do you remember what direction you came from?" Tommy asked. Proud of himself for thinking of such a practical question, Eleanor pointed toward the hills in the distance. but then her hand wavered uncertainly between two different directions. I think, maybe that way. Or perhaps this way. All the hills look the same to me now. My old eyes are not as sharp as they once were. Tommy studied the landscape around them. He had been exploring these roads for years, and knew them better than most adults. The hills did all look similar, especially to someone who wasn't familiar with the area. But Tommy knew that there were subtle differences, the shape of certain rock formations, the way the creek beds curved, the types of trees that grew in different spots. Mrs. Eleanor, he said, I know these roads really well. If you want, I could help you find your way back to your family. The words came out before he fully thought about what he was offering, but once he said them, he knew it was the right thing to do. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. You would do this for an old woman you do not know? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. Tommy nodded without hesitation. My grandpa always says that when someone needs help, you help them. He says it doesn't matter if they're a stranger, or if they look different from you. What matters is that they're a person who needs help. Eleanor reached out and gently touched Tommy's cheek with her weathered hand. Her touch was soft and reminded him of his own grandmother's gentle caresses. Your grandfather is a wise man, she said, and you, young Tommy, have a good heart. The spirits brought you to me today. Tommy wasn't entirely sure what she meant about spirits, but he could tell it was something important and good. He felt proud that this kind grandmother thought well of him and his family's teachings. Can you walk okay? Tommy asked, noticing that Eleanor moved slowly when she shifted her position on the log. It might be a pretty long way, and I can't ride my bike and help you at the same time. Eleanor stood up carefully, her joints creaking slightly with age. I can walk, she said with determination. I may be old, but I am strong. My people have been walking these lands for many, many generations. Walking is in my blood. Tommy admired her spirit. Even though she was tired and lost, Eleanor carried herself with dignity and strength. He could tell that she was the kind of person who didn't give up easily, and that made him even more determined to help her find her way home. He climbed back on his bike and started walking it beside Eleanor as she began to move down the road. The afternoon sun was getting lower, painting the sky with the first hints of orange and pink. Tommy knew they needed to find Eleanor's family before dark, but he wasn't worried. He had a good feeling about this adventure, and he was excited to learn more about this interesting grandmother who seemed to carry so much wisdom in her gentle smile. As they started walking together, Tommy pushing his red bicycle alongside Eleanor, the afternoon heat seemed to wrap around them like a heavy blanket. Eleanor moved slowly but steadily, her moccasins making soft sounds against the gravel road. Every few minutes, she would pause and look around, studying the landscape with the careful attention of someone trying to remember which way to go. Tell me, young Tommy, Eleanor said, after they had walked for about 10 minutes, do you live near here with your family? Tommy nodded, grateful for the conversation. Walking in silence felt awkward, and he was curious about this kind grandmother, who seemed so different from anyone he had ever met. Yeah, we live in town. It's about 5 miles that way. He pointed back toward where he had come from. My mom works at the library, and my dad fixes cars at Joe's garage. Eleanor smiled at this simple description of his life. A library, she repeated thoughtfully. Your mother must love books and stories very much. She does, Tommy said proudly. She reads to me and my little sister Katie every night. Sometimes she tells us stories about when she was little, growing up on her family's farm. Stories are very important, Eleanor said, adjusting her leather bag on her shoulder. In my culture, we pass down our history through stories. My grandmother told me stories that her grandmother told her, going back many generations. These stories teach us who we are and where we come from. Tommy found this fascinating. What kind of stories? He asked. Eleanor's eyes lit up as she began to speak. Oh, many kinds. Stories about how the world was created. Stories about brave warriors and wise chiefs. Stories about animals that can talk and teach us lessons. She pointed to a red-winged blackbird perched on a fence post nearby. See that bird? We have stories about how the blackbird got his red wings. Would you like to hear one? Yes, please, Tommy said eagerly, completely forgetting about the heat and the long walk ahead as they continued down the dusty road. Eleanor began to tell him an ancient Lakota story about a time when all birds were the same color. She spoke about a great fire that threatened to destroy all the animals, and how a small blackbird flew back and forth through the flames, carrying water in his beak to help put out the fire. The tips of his wings got burned bright red from flying so close to the flames, but he saved all the other animals. And that, Eleanor concluded, is why the blackbird has red on his wings to this day. It reminds us that even small acts of bravery and kindness can make a big difference. Tommy was so captivated by the story that he barely noticed they had walked almost a mile. That's amazing, he said. Do you know more stories like that? Eleanor chuckled softly. Oh, child, I know hundreds of stories. My grandmother made sure of that. She said that stories are like seeds. You plant them in young minds, and they grow into wisdom and understanding. They came to a fork in the road, and Tommy paused to think. One path led toward the rolling hills, where he had seen people camping before, while the other wound through a small valley, with a creek running through it. Eleanor studied both directions, her brow furrowed with concentration. I remember water, she said slowly. We camped near water because we needed it for cooking and washing. But I also remember hills. Tommy looked at both paths carefully. Well, the creek path has water, but there are hills along both roads, he said. Do you remember anything else? Like what the camp looked like, or if there were any special trees or rocks nearby? Eleanor closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if she was trying to remember through her other senses. There was a very old cottonwood tree, she said after a moment. Huge and twisted, with branches that reached out like arms. My great-grandson liked to climb in it. Tommy's face brightened. I know that tree. It's down by Miller's Creek, about 2 miles from here. He pointed toward the valley path. That way. As they started down the creek path, Eleanor seemed more relaxed, as if something about the direction felt right to her. The road here was shadier, with tall trees on both sides that provided relief from the hot sun. Tommy could hear the gentle sound of water running over rocks somewhere ahead of them. Tell me about your great-grandson, Tommy said. The one who likes to climb trees. Eleanor's whole face seemed to glow when she talked about her family. Ah, Little Wolf. That's what we call him. He's about your age, maybe a year younger. That boy climbs like a squirrel and runs like a deer. His real name is David, but we call him Little Wolf because when he was very small, he would howl like a wolf pup when he was hungry. Tommy laughed at this image. Does your whole family have special names like that? Many of us do, Eleanor explained. In our tradition, sometimes children receive names based on their personality or something special about them. Little Wolf's sister, she's called Singing Bird because she hums and sings all day long. Their father is my grandson, and we call him Strong Bear because he's very tall and powerful, but also very gentle. As they walked, Eleanor continued to share stories about her large extended family. She told Tommy about her 7 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren, all scattered across different reservations, but coming together for special occasions like this summer gathering. She described how they maintained old traditions while also living modern lives. Some of her grandchildren were teachers and nurses and mechanics, but they still participated in traditional ceremonies and learned the old ways. Tommy was amazed by how big Eleanor's family was compared to his own small family of 4. It must be really fun when you all get together, he said. It is wonderful, Eleanor agreed, but also very loud. She laughed. So many children running around, and all the adults trying to catch up on each other's news. The cooking fires burn from morning until night, and there's always someone telling stories or singing traditional songs. They had been walking for over an hour now, and Tommy could see that Eleanor was getting tired, though she was trying hard not to show it. Her steps were slower, and she was breathing a little harder. He wanted to suggest that they rest, but he also knew that they needed to find her family before it got dark. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said gently, "would you like to sit down and rest for a few minutes? There's a nice shady spot up ahead by that big oak tree." Eleanor looked grateful for the suggestion. "That would be very kind, Tommy. These old legs aren't as strong as they used to be." They settled under the oak tree, and Eleanor opened her leather bag to show Tommy some of the plants she had gathered that morning. She explained how different herbs could be used for healing, some for stomach aches, some for headaches, and others for helping people sleep better. Tommy was fascinated by her knowledge and asked dozens of questions about how she learned to identify the plants and prepare them as medicines. "My grandmother taught me," Eleanor said, "just as her grandmother taught her. This knowledge has been passed down through many generations of women in our family. Someday, I will teach little Wolf's sister and the other girls in our family, so the knowledge will not be lost." As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting the clouds with shades of orange and pink, Tommy knew they needed to continue their journey, but he found himself hoping that the walk would last a little longer. He had never met anyone like Eleanor, and her stories and wisdom made him see the world in a completely new way. After their short rest under the oak tree, Tommy and Eleanor continued walking as the sun started to paint the sky with deeper shades of orange and red. The air was beginning to cool slightly, and Tommy could smell the earthy scent of the creek getting stronger. They had been walking together for almost 2 hours now, and Tommy was starting to worry that maybe he had chosen the wrong path after all. Eleanor seemed to sense his concern. "Don't worry, young one," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I have a good feeling about this direction. Sometimes our hearts know the way, even when our minds are confused." Just as Tommy was about to suggest they climb the next hill to get a better view, Eleanor suddenly stopped walking. Her entire body went still, and she tilted her head to one side, listening intently to something Tommy couldn't hear. "What is it?" Tommy whispered. Not sure why he was whispering, but feeling like he should. Eleanor's weathered face broke into the biggest smile Tommy had seen from her all afternoon. "Smoke," she said, taking a deep breath through her nose. "I can smell the smoke from cooking fires," and she paused, listening again. "I think I hear voices." Tommy strained his ears and finally caught the faint sound of people talking and laughing in the distance. His heart jumped with excitement. "Really? Where's it coming from?" Eleanor pointed toward a hill just ahead of them. "Over that rise, I think." "Oh, Tommy, I believe we found them." Despite her tiredness, Eleanor began walking faster, her moccasins almost dancing on the gravel road. Tommy pushed his bike alongside her, both of them filled with new energy and hope. As they climbed the gentle slope of the hill, the sounds grew clearer, children laughing, adults calling to each other, and the crackling of wood burning. When they reached the top of the hill, Tommy gasped at the sight below them. In a large meadow beside the creek, with that massive old cottonwood tree standing guard at the edge, was a camp unlike anything he had ever seen. There were several tents and temporary shelters arranged in a circle, with 3 cooking fires sending ribbons of smoke into the evening air. People of all ages moved around the camp, some tending to the fires, others preparing food, and children running and playing in the grass. "There," Eleanor cried out, pointing to the big cottonwood tree, where a small boy was indeed climbing among the twisted branches. "There's little Wolf." She cupped her hands around her mouth and called out in a voice that carried clearly across the meadow, "Little Wolf, strong bear, I'm here." The effect was immediate and magical. The entire camp seemed to freeze for a moment, and then suddenly everyone was looking up toward the hill. A tall, powerful-looking man near one of the fires dropped the stick he was holding and started running toward them. Several women followed, their long skirts flying behind them, and children began streaming up the hill like a river flowing uphill. "Grandmother," the tall man shouted as he ran, and Tommy could hear the relief and joy in his voice. "Grandmother, Eleanor." Eleanor began hurrying down the hill as fast as her old legs could carry her, and Tommy followed, his heart pounding with excitement. When the tall man reached Eleanor, he swept her up in a huge bear hug, lifting her right off the ground despite her protests that she was too old for such treatment. "We were so worried," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When the sun started going down and you hadn't come back, we were getting ready to organize search parties." "I'm sorry, Strong Bear," Eleanor said, patting his cheek like he was still a little boy instead of a grown man who towered over her. "I followed that special sage too far into the hills and got myself all turned around." By now, the entire family had gathered around them, women with braided hair and colorful dresses, men wearing a mix of traditional and modern clothes, and children of all ages, chattering excitedly in both English and Lakota. Tommy stood back a little, suddenly feeling shy around so many strangers, but Eleanor wouldn't let him hide. Wait, everyone," Eleanor said, raising her hands for quiet. "I want you all to meet someone very special. This is Tommy." She reached out and gently pulled him forward. "This young man found me sitting by the roadside, lost and worried. He walked with me for hours, helping me find my way back to you." Tommy felt his cheeks burning red as all these people turned to look at him. He had never been the center of attention like this before, and he wasn't sure what to say or do. Strong Bear, who Tommy now realized was Eleanor's grandson, knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. "Is this true, Tommy? You helped my grandmother get home safely?" Tommy nodded, still feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. "She was lost, and I know these roads pretty good, so I just ... I wanted to help." A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and silver streaking through her black hair stepped forward. "I am Running Deer, Eleanor's daughter," she said. "How can we ever thank you for taking care of our mother?" Before Tommy could answer, Little Wolf came scrambling down from the cottonwood tree and pushed through the group of adults. He was indeed about Tommy's age, with bright, curious eyes and grass stains on his jeans. "Did you really walk all that way with grandmother?" Little Wolf asked. "That's so cool. I bet she told you lots of stories, didn't she?" Tommy grinned, finally, feeling more comfortable. "Yeah, she told me about the blackbird and his red wings, and about your family, and all kinds of neat stuff about plants and medicine." An elderly man with long gray braids and a weathered cowboy hat stepped forward. "Young man," he said in a voice that commanded respect, "in our culture, when someone shows such kindness to an elder, especially to our grandmother, they become part of our family. You have done more than just help a lost old woman. You have shown the true spirit of what it means to be a good human being." Eleanor beamed with pride. "This is my husband's brother, Joseph Whitefeather. He speaks for our family at tribal meetings." Joseph placed his hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Tommy, you must stay and eat with us tonight. It's the least we can do to show our gratitude." Tommy looked around at all the faces surrounding him, men, women, and children who had been complete strangers just minutes ago, but who were now looking at him like he was their long-lost nephew. The cooking fire smelled incredible, filled with scents he had never experienced before, and he could see that they were preparing a feast that would feed dozens of people. I would like that," Tommy said, "but I should probably call my parents. They'll be worried if I don't come home for dinner." Running Deer smiled warmly. "Of course, dear. Strong Bear, drive into town and call the boys' parents. Explain what happened and ask if Tommy can stay for our evening meal." As Strong Bear headed toward an old pickup truck parked at the edge of the camp, the rest of the family began leading Tommy toward the fires. Children gathered around him, asking questions about where he lived and whether he had ever been to a Native American camp before. The women began piling plates high with food, corn, bread, wild rice, roasted meat that tasted like nothing Tommy had ever had before, and fresh vegetables from their own gardens. Eleanor sat beside Tommy on a blanket near the central fire, watching with obvious pleasure as her family welcomed this young stranger who had brought her safely home. "You see, Tommy," she said quietly, "this is how we show gratitude in our culture. We don't just say thank you and walk away. We welcome you into our circle, into our family." Tommy looked around at all the smiling faces, listened to the mixture of languages being spoken, smelled the wood smoke and delicious food, and felt something warm and special settling in his chest. He had started this day as just a boy looking for adventure on his bicycle, but somehow he had stumbled into something much bigger and more wonderful than he could have ever imagined. Strong Bear returned from town about an hour later, just as the evening meal was winding down and the campfire was being built up for storytelling time. Tommy had spent the time getting to know Eleanor's family, playing simple games with the children and listening to the adults talk about their daily lives. He felt more relaxed now, though he still couldn't quite believe how welcome they had made him feel. "Good news," Strong Bear announced as he walked back into the circle of firelight. "I spoke with your mother, Tommy. She was worried when you didn't come home, but when I explained what happened, she was very proud of you. She said you can stay as long as you want tonight, but she'd like you home before it gets too late." Tommy felt a wave of relief. His mother understood, just like he had hoped she would. She had always taught him to help people in need, and now he was seeing how that simple lesson could lead to amazing experiences. Eleanor patted the blanket beside her, inviting Tommy to sit back down. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks dancing up into the darkening sky. Around the circle, faces glowed in the warm orange light, and Tommy could see 3 generations of the same family, from elderly grandparents to tiny toddlers who were starting to get sleepy. "Tommy," Eleanor said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "I want to tell you something important. In our Lakota tradition, what you did for me today wasn't just a nice gesture. It was something much deeper." Joseph Whitefeather nodded and leaned forward. "When someone helps an elder in our culture, especially when that elder is lost or in danger, it creates a sacred bond, not just between the helper and the elder, but between the helper and the entire family, the entire community." Tommy wasn't sure he understood completely, but he could tell this was something very important to them. "What kind of bond?" he asked. Eleanor smiled and took his hand in both of hers. "The kind of bond that makes you family, even though you weren't born into our family. The kind of bond that means you will always have a place at our fire, always have people who care about what happens to you." Running Deer, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Tommy, next week we're having our annual summer ceremony. It's a 3-day celebration that brings together people from several reservations. There will be traditional dancing, storytelling, games, and feasting. Normally, this is just for our community, for Native families who have been part of these traditions for generations. But this year," Strong Bear added, "we want to invite you and your family to join us." Tommy's eyes widened. "Really? Me and my family?" Little Wolf bounced excitedly on his spot across the fire. "Oh, you have to come. There's going to be horse racing and stick games and the best food you've ever tasted. And at night, the elders tell the most amazing stories about the old days." An older woman named Gentle Rain, who Tommy learned was Eleanor's sister, shook her head with a smile. "Little Wolf, slow down. Let us explain properly." She turned to Tommy. "This invitation is a great honor, young man. We don't usually invite outsiders to our most sacred celebrations. But you've shown us something special today. You've shown us that kindness and respect don't depend on what color your skin is, or where you were born." Joseph nodded gravely. "What Eleanor's sister says is true. Some of our ceremonies are only for our people, because they're connected to our specific spiritual beliefs and traditions that have been passed down for hundreds of years. But this summer celebration, it's different. It's about community, about family, about celebrating the good things in life. Eleanor squeezed Tommy's hand. When I was sitting on that log today, feeling lost and scared, I prayed to the spirits to help me find my way home, and they sent me you, a young boy with a good heart, who didn't see an old Indian woman as a stranger to be avoided, but as a grandmother who needed help. Tommy felt his chest swell with pride and emotion. I just wanted to help. That's what my grandpa always says you should do. And that, said Strong Bear, is exactly why we want your family to be part of our celebration. Your grandfather raised you with the same values we try to teach our own children. The fire popped loudly, and everyone looked up as sparks swirled toward the stars that were just becoming visible in the darkening sky. Tommy had never felt anything quite like what he was feeling right now, a mixture of honor, excitement, and something deeper that he couldn't quite name. What would we do at the celebration? Tommy asked. I mean, I don't know any of your dances or traditions. Little Wolf grinned. That's okay. Nobody expects you to know everything right away. We'll teach you some of the dances that everyone can do. And there are games and contests that are just for fun. Foot races, tug of war, competitions to see who can throw a spear the farthest. And the food, added Singing Bird, Little Wolf's sister, who had been quietly listening. Grandmother Eleanor makes the best fry bread in 3 counties, and we'll roast a whole pig, and there will be corn soup and wild rice and berries we picked ourselves. Eleanor chuckled. These children, they always think about food first. But they're right. We take great pride in feeding everyone well during our celebrations. Running Deer looked thoughtful. Tommy, I want you to understand that if you and your family come to our celebration, you won't just be guests or visitors. You'll be participants. You'll be expected to join in, to be part of the community for those 3 days. Are you ready for something like that? Tommy thought about it seriously. He imagined his parents and little sister Katie being part of something like this. His mom would love learning about the traditions and probably ask a million questions. His dad would enjoy the games and competitions, and Katie would have a blast playing with all the other children. I think so, he said. I mean, I'd have to ask my parents, but I think they'd really like it. They always tell us about how important it is to learn about different cultures and make friends with all kinds of people. Joseph smiled approvingly. Good. That tells me your parents raised you right. Eleanor stood up slowly, and the entire circle fell quiet. Tommy could tell that she was about to say something important. She walked over to a large bag near one of the tents and returned carrying something wrapped in soft leather. Tommy, she said, unwrapping what appeared to be a beautiful necklace made of carved bone and colorful beads. This belonged to my grandmother's grandmother. It's very old and very special. I want you to wear it next week during our celebration so that everyone will know you are an honored guest of our family. Tommy stared at the necklace in amazement. Even in the firelight, he could see how intricate and beautiful it was. Each bead seemed to tell a story, and the carved pieces had tiny animals and symbols etched into them. I can't take something that important, Tommy said, though his voice showed how much the offer meant to him. You're not taking it, Eleanor said firmly. I'm giving it to you. There's a difference. This necklace has been waiting for the right person to wear it again. Today, watching you walk beside an old woman for hours, listening to her stories, treating her with respect and kindness. Today, I knew that person was you. Strong Bear stood up and placed his hand on Tommy's shoulder. In 1 week, on Friday evening, our celebration begins. If your family agrees to come, meet us here at sunset. We'll have a place prepared for you to camp, or if you prefer, you can drive home each night and return in the morning. Tommy nodded, feeling overwhelmed by their generosity and trust. I'll talk to my parents tonight. but I really hope we can come. This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me." Eleanor smiled and carefully placed the necklace around Tommy's neck. It felt warm against his chest, as if it carried the love and history of all the people who had worn it before him. "Now, you carry a piece of our family with you always," she said. "And next week, if the spirits are willing, your family will become part of ours." The week that followed seemed to drag by slower than any week in Tommy's life. He had talked to his parents the moment he got home that night. Still wearing Eleanor's precious necklace and practically glowing with excitement, his mother, Linda, had listened with tears in her eyes as Tommy described his adventure and the incredible kindness of Eleanor's family. His father, Robert, had been amazed by the honor they were extending to their family. "You know, son," his father had said, "some people go their whole lives without experiencing something like this. You've been invited into a culture that most outsiders never get to see." His little sister Katie had been fascinated by the necklace and made Tommy tell her the story 3 times before bedtime. "Will there really be other kids there to play with?" she kept asking. "And can I learn to do the dances too?" By Wednesday, Tommy had already packed and repacked his backpack twice, wondering what he should bring to a 3-day Native American celebration. His mother had called the library where she worked and asked her supervisor, Mrs. Johnson, for advice, since Mrs. Johnson had grown up near several reservations and knew something about Native traditions. "Bring something simple as a gift for the family," Mrs. Johnson had suggested. "Nothing fancy or expensive, but something that shows you appreciate their invitation. Maybe some fresh fruit, or flowers from your garden, or something your family makes well." In the end, Tommy's mother decided to bake 3 of her famous apple pies, using apples from their own tree in the backyard. "Food is something that brings people together everywhere," she said as she rolled out the dough, "and I want to contribute something to their celebration." Friday evening couldn't come fast enough. The whole Thompson family piled into their old station wagon just as the sun was beginning to set, with camping gear, food, and nervous excitement filling the car. Tommy wore the special necklace Eleanor had given him, and he could feel its weight against his chest like a reminder of the promise he had made. When they arrived at the meadow by the creek, Tommy gasped at what he saw. The small family camp he had visited a week ago had transformed into something magical. There were now dozens of tents and temporary shelters arranged in several circles, with cooking fires sending smoke spirals into the evening sky. People were everywhere, men, women, and children of all ages. Many dressed in traditional clothing with intricate beadwork and colorful patterns that seemed to dance in the firelight. The sound was incredible too. Drums were beating in rhythm from different parts of the camp, creating a heartbeat that seemed to pulse through the ground. People were singing in Lakota, their voices rising and falling like the wind across the prairie. Children were laughing and running between the tents, playing games that Tommy had never seen before. "Oh my," his mother whispered, clutching the apple pies tighter. "It's beautiful." Eleanor appeared as if from nowhere, dressed in the most amazing outfit Tommy had ever seen. Her dress was made of soft leather and covered with thousands of tiny beads that formed pictures of eagles, buffalo, and flowers. Her long gray hair was braided with colorful ribbons and feathers, and she wore jewelry that caught the light with every movement. "Tommy, you came," she exclaimed, wrapping him in a warm hug. "And you brought your family. Welcome, welcome all of you." Tommy's parents introduced themselves, and Eleanor immediately took them under her wing, introducing them to what seemed like hundreds of people. Everyone they met was friendly and welcoming, shaking hands warmly and thanking Tommy again and again for helping their grandmother. Strong Bear appeared with Little Wolf and Singing Bird, both dressed in traditional clothes that made them look like they had stepped out of a history book. "Tommy," Little Wolf called out, "you've got to see this. They set up a whole area just for kids' games. There's going to be races and contests and everything." But before Tommy could run off with his new friends, Joseph Whitefeather approached, with several other elderly men. "First," he said, with a kind but serious expression, "Tommy and his family must be properly welcomed to our celebration." What followed was unlike anything the Thompson family had ever experienced. They were led to the center of the largest circle, where hundreds of people had gathered. Joseph began speaking in both Lakota and English, telling the story of how Tommy had found Eleanor and helped her home. As he spoke, people nodded and smiled, and Tommy could hear murmurs of approval from the crowd. Then Eleanor stepped forward, carrying a beautiful feather that seemed to glow in the firelight. "This is an eagle feather," she explained to Tommy's family. "In our culture, eagle feathers are sacred. They represent honor, strength, and connection to the Creator. We only give them to people who have shown great kindness or bravery." Tommy's eyes widened as Eleanor approached him. "Tommy, by helping a lost elder find her way home, you showed the true spirit of what it means to be a good human being. You didn't help me because I was Lakota or because I was a stranger. You helped me because I was a person who needed help. That is the highest honor anyone can show." She carefully tucked the eagle feather into Tommy's hair, just above his ear. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Tommy felt his face burn red with embarrassment and pride. "Now," Strong Bear announced, "Tommy and his family are officially part of our celebration. Tommy, that feather marks you as an honorary member of our tribe. Wherever you go in your life, if you meet other Native people and show them that feather, they will know that you are a friend to our people." The next 3 days passed like a wonderful dream. Tommy learned traditional dances, his feet stumbling at first, but gradually finding the rhythm as Little Wolf and the other children showed him the steps. He competed in foot races and games of skill, cheering loudly for new friends and being cheered for in return. His mother spent hours talking with the women, learning about traditional crafts and sharing stories about raising children. She even tried her hand at beading, creating a simple bracelet with help from Running Deer and some of the other mothers. His father joined the men in their daily discussions about everything from farming to fixing cars, discovering that people everywhere shared similar concerns and dreams. Little Katie was in heaven, surrounded by dozens of children who treated her like a beloved little sister. She learned Lakota words for animals and colors, played traditional games, and collected pretty stones and flowers from around the camp. But the most special moments for Tommy came during the evening storytelling sessions. Each night after the dancing and feasting were done, the elders would gather around the central fire and share the old stories. Tommy sat between Eleanor and Little Wolf, listening to tales that had been told for hundreds of years. Stories about creation, about heroes and spirits, about the connection between all living things. On the final night, as the celebration was winding down, Eleanor took Tommy aside for a private conversation. "Tommy," she said, "I want you to know that what happened between us last week and what has happened this weekend, it's not ending here." Tommy looked up at her, not sure what she meant. "You are part of our family now," she continued. "That means you always have a place to come when you need guidance, or comfort, or just want to be around people who care about you. It means we will celebrate your successes and support you through your challenges. It means that your children, when you have children someday, will also be part of our extended family." Tommy felt tears prick at his eyes. "Really? Even after we go home and everything goes back to normal?" Eleanor smiled and touched the eagle feather in his hair. "Tommy, nothing will ever be exactly the same for you. You've learned that the world is bigger and more wonderful than you knew before. You've learned that kindness can build bridges between any two people, no matter how different they seem. And you've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and taking care of each other." As the Thompson family packed up their camping gear and prepared to head home, Tommy looked back at the camp one more time. People were already starting to take down tents and pack their own belongings. But the warmth and love he had felt over the past 3 days seemed to linger in the air. 20 years later, Tommy would return to this same meadow with his own children, wearing the same eagle feather and necklace Eleanor had given him. He would tell his kids the story of how he had found a lost grandmother on a dusty road, and how that simple act of kindness had changed his life forever. And Eleanor, now in her 90s, but still sharp as ever, would smile and say, "You see, children? This is what happens when we open our hearts to each other."